How many of you think that if we go to work to get back on the right track, that there will be very powerful interest groups trying to stop us? Okay. Now, I just want to think about this because it frames why I'm running, why I'm proposing a contract, and why I tell people that I'm not going to ask you to be for me. Because if you're for me, you'll vote, you'll go home, and you say, I sure hope he fixes it. And that's impossible. Any candidate who comes here and tells you they'll fix it, you should automatically vote against. Because they don't have a clue what they're talking about. Our constitutional system does not give any one person the capacity to affect the scale of change we want. Under our Constitution, you have to have the House and the Senate and the President, and in order to have the House, the Senate, and the President, you have to have the American people. And so I ask people to be with me and to be prepared for 8 years to stand shoulder to shoulder, to remind the Congress and the Senate what we're all about, to remind your state legislators and your governor what we're all about, and to recognize that if we implement the 10th Amendment and we shrink power in Washington, we better grow citizen power back home. So that we're talking about very profound change. We had the largest one-party increase in American history was 1994. And the real power of this, and I was quite surprised to see it last night, but the real power of this was two things. One was that by being positive, we gave the American people something they could be proud of, that they could be for. And literally the largest one-party increase in American history in off years, 1994, we gained 9 million votes. And the Democrats lost about 1 million votes. The second reason this really mattered was it was a management document for the party. It said, when we win, this is what we're going to do. And it was much bolder. And if we had won a majority by pure luck, we would not have had anything like this level of energy and drive. Because people would have floundered around for the first 90 days saying, what should we do, what should we do? As it was, since they'd already signed this, I could say, then we're going to do this. So in that context, I thought a long time, when I sat down, I helped found the Center for Health Transformation to look at positive, doctor-patient, decentralized, local, market-oriented solutions to healthcare, the opposite of what Obamacare is. And I worked as a volunteer advisor in the national security area and in health for the Bush administration. So having had 20 years at Capitol Hill from the legislative branch, I got 6 years inside the executive branch through 2006, really looking at what works, what doesn't work, why doesn't it work. My conclusion was that we need 4 very profound changes. One of them is up here. The actual contract will have 4 parts. This is part 1. This is the legislation. So we need, first of all, very large legislative changes. Now I'm going to show you those in this room. We need, second, a first-day executive order project, which we will post by October 1st, 2012. And on the first day, shortly after the inaugural address, I will sign between 50 and 200 executive orders. Now, these operate within the law. The tradition goes all the way back to George Washington, but they direct the government on how to interpret the law. For example, the first executive order will abolish all of the czars as of that day. Because I can do it by just signing an executive order. That'll happen in the very opening day. And we actually have a place at newt.org. My campaign website is my first name. So you can go to newt.org, and we have a place where you can submit ideas you'd like to have looked at about executive orders. So the first part is legislation. This, I think, will probably take a full year to completely implement for reasons I'll come back to. The second is executive orders, which can be implemented literally on the opening day. And since they'll be posted by October 1st, when we win, people will know in November and December and early January what's going to happen. So, for example, I suspect all the czars will have left before we win. Or at least they'll have out job applications. The third thing we need, and this was a real lesson to me that I learned this spring, working with some consultants, because it didn't work out. And it's not that they weren't smart people. They were smart people at something I didn't want to do. I worked with Reagan's team on the 1980 campaign. I worked on the 1994 campaign, obviously. I have a very particular approach. It's very substantive. It's probably slightly boring. It focuses on solutions, not slogans. It doesn't have any 30-second attack ads. And I think for us to be a governing majority, we have to be much more inclusive than we have been. Right? You're not going to govern in California unless you have African Americans, Native Americans, Asian Americans, and Latino Americans in the coalition. You're not going to govern, in my judgment, unless you add to the conservative base and the Tea Party base, and you have people who care about specific issues, and you'll see a couple of them up here, that I think brings a whole new wave of energy, a whole new wave of enthusiasm to what we're doing. Well, this is very different than a traditional Republican campaign. But what I realized in going through this, and ultimately we spoke with the consultants because they had a model they wanted to run, which is perfectly legitimate, very standard model. And I had a model I wanted to run. And we finally sat down and I said, look, I'd love for you to run my campaign. I can't be the candidate for your campaign. And I realized afterwards, as I thought about it, you have to have a training program. What I want to accomplish on your behalf is so different from traditional Washington government. And so the third project that we're going to have is a training program both for the transition people and for every presidential appointee. It says, this is the direction we're going to go in. This is how we're going to go there. And let me give you an example. One of the reasons this is very different than 94. In 94, we were standing on Ronald Reagan's shoulders. Ronald Reagan in 1966, running for governor, said we ought to reform welfare. By 1994, we'd had 28 years of talking about welfare reform. We had books written, and we really had a pretty good idea what we were doing. Some of these are really new. They're really different. But there's another part to it. The American people, having gone through a $800 billion stimulus that nobody knew was in because not a single elected official read it, having gone through an Obamacare legislation of 2,700 pages for which Speaker Pelosi said we have to pass the bill to learn what's in it. The American people don't want somebody to come, no matter who you are, they don't want you to show up and say, hi, here are the 10 things I will impose on you in the first 90 days. Because what the American people want is a sense of participation and accountability and knowing before the vote what's in the bill. And so it's a very different, I think we're in a different world than 1994. And so this is going to require going to subcommittees, having hearings, having markups out in the open, going to full committee, going to the floor, having a chance to amend the bill, going to conferences. And I'm not going to be in the legislative branch, but I'm going to propose that they seriously consider having the conferences on C-SPAN. Because the conferences are really, really important. And you deserve to know what's going on. Well, that process can't be done in 90 days. It's not physically doable. So while I can move a lot of things in the first day, some of these you can do pretty fast. We can pass a repeal of Obamacare in the first 2 or 3 weeks because everybody knows what it is. It's very straightforward. But to replace Obamacare is going to take 6 months to a year. Because there are a lot of serious issues that need to be talked out in public with everybody participating. Okay? And so think about it as that model. The last thing, if you get legislation, you get executive orders, you get a brand new training program that have a very different style and a very different approach. The last thing is we have to have a citizen movement. This will not work unless people decide they want to save their country. For a couple of reasons.